Good day, YouTube. That transitionatory period between day and night, sunset and sunrise, offers some of the highest potential to create some of the most beautiful and breathtaking photographs filled with red, yellow, and orange hues that are so radiant. And today I'm going to show you how to use Adobe Lightroom to transform images that look like this and turn them into this. Hang around to find out more. All right, so there's two photographs that I want to process with you guys today in Lightroom. And the first photograph I took outside of Reykjavik, Iceland, in the Thingvellir Park area. And I was driving with my wife late in the day around sunset, and we drove around this lake, and I noticed that the colorful sun was pushing so much light, these crepuscular rays, through the clouds by this mountain ridge. And I told her, we got to stop. I got to photograph this. And I got out of the car and I set up my telephoto lens, and I noticed that there was these birds and that they were going to be passing through my image within maybe 20 seconds or so. And I prepared everything pretty quickly, and I had my camera fortunately at a high ISO, and I snapped that photograph, and I was able to capture that scene. And that's one of those moments where you're just kind of ready and being at the right place at the right time and understand how to use your camera to snap that photo. So let's get cracking and go to the dungeon. All right, so I'm in Adobe Lightroom now, and I opened up this image I took in Iceland with the crepuscular rays. And as I mentioned, I took this image at a high ISO because I wanted to stop that bird that was in flight and other birds that I was seeing around, trying to incorporate this, to create an animate landscape. And as a result of using an older camera with a higher ISO, I got noise. So the very first thing I'm going to do this image is get a nice starting platform and actually do some noise reduction on the image so that I have a good working template, knowing that if I want to fine tune that noise adjustment later, I can. So I'm going to go to the Develop tab here, and I'm going to scroll down all the way to this detail section right here. I'm going to go ahead and dial some noise reduction in. So I've kind of found that with my camera and my lenses, unless it's the sharpest of the lenses, I like to boost the sharpness up. And with that high noise reduction, I'm going to want to add a little bit of sharpness to it. So we have luminance noise and color noise. So just as a quick note here, luminance noise refers to the noise reduction essentially applied to the black and white part of the frame, the luminance, the light. And color noise is going to be applied to the color data. So we're going to generally want to apply more noise reduction to the luminance band here. So I'm going to go ahead and start dialing it in. And we can start playing with it, and notice that you can really see those shadows clear up, and it gets a lot smoother. And now if we add it too much, it can really kind of get some of that plasticky feel. So I'm gonna be careful with that. So I'm not gonna go that high, obviously up to 100, but I think for this image, somewhere around 50 is, I'm gonna call it good at about 50 for now. And color noise, similar story. I'm gonna play around with the color slider here. Probably go around just a light 25. All right, so that smoothed off the image. So the next thing I'm going to do before I go ahead and do further modifications is I'm just going to despot this. So I'm going to go up to my spot healing tool and pull out the spot that I see right here. Did a fantastic job of removing it. And there's a spot in the lower left right here. And we can use the spot healing tool to get this one as well. So I'm going to be very careful. All right. All right, I like the way that looks. Okay, so that's the starting template. All right, so I think one of the most important skills in processing really any image with Adobe Lightroom, but certainly sunset photos, is making use of local contrast enhancements. So when we use Lightroom, we often feel we can go in and adjust, like let's reduce the highlights, let's increase the shadows, and make global adjustments to the image, and we can try to pull in some of the things that are harder to see, or reduce the things that are too bright, etc. But often we can make an image pop a lot more if we go ahead and actually apply specific adjustments to very specific parts of the image in different amounts. And we can really bring out a lot of character in the image, as well as help our viewer know where their eye should look. All right, so now we're going to start applying some global adjustments to make this image really pop and add some depth. So before I do that, I'm just going to quickly switch to my camera standard color profile because I like that a lot better with my Nikon D300. All right, so the first thing I want to do to this image is correct this piercing sky right here. I want to bring as much detail I can back into the clouds. So the way I'm going to do that is, well, what you could do is you could do something like globally, like reduce the highlights, but that affects the whole image and it reduces the radiance on like the crepuscular rays and everything else too. So I want to avoid that. So I want to apply an effect locally just to this top of the image here where the sky is overexposed. So I'm going to click the circle icon right here to go to the mask tab, and I'm going to go ahead and click radial gradients and create a radial gradient on the image and orient it in such a way that it's ovular and covers the overexposed part of the sky, like such. Okay. So there's one of two things we can do here. We can reduce the exposure on the masked area, which typically is usually where you want to go first, but I don't think that looks particularly great with this image. So instead, I'm just going to go ahead here and go to the highlights and restore some of that detail. There we go. So that preserves some of the detail in the highlights. All right, so now that we protected some of the sky, the next thing I'm going to do is create another mask, and I really want to increase the radiance on these crepuscular rays and really make them stand out. So to do that, we're actually going to create several masks, but the first mask we're going to create is just on the crepuscular rays themselves. Okay, so I'm going to go click this plus right here, and I'm going to go select, in this case, color range, because I want to select the color that is the crepuscular ray. And I'm going to have to refine that because that's selecting way too much of the image. So you're being very careful here. Okay. Let's start, yeah, about right there. So this is now selecting the crepuscular rays that I want. And now that we've done that, so to really make these stand out, we can go to the whites right here and increase the brightness of the whites, which really makes those crepuscular rays pop out. I'm going to probably do that around about 35. So we can click that effect on and off and see what it does. See what it did. You can see it's already starting to make those rays stand out that much more and have so much more contrast. All right, so to even further increase the contrast towards these crepuscular rays, we're going to add two more masks. So the first mask I want to add is another radial gradient. And I'm going to drag that over here to the top left of the image and rotate it to sort of encompass this darker part of the sky where the crepuscular ray isn't, and orient that about here. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and reduce the exposure a little bit. That's too much. So about minus 0.3. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I can create another radial gradient. Sometimes that window gets in the way. Here we go. Let me go ahead and reduce the exposure a little bit. I think, yeah, about there. Not as strong as the other one. Cool. So we can click those on and off and see, you know, when we go ahead and do that, it really creates a lot of contrast towards these crepuscular rays and just makes them stand out that much more. And we could not do that if we just went ahead and did global adjustments, because there's no way we would have had that much control over the image. But this allows us, almost like a painter, to go in and paint on certain effects to really make certain parts of the image stand out and really capture the viewer's eye in the way we kind of want. All right, so with one further step, we can actually make those rays stand out even more with even more radiance. And I'm going to apply one more radial gradient and apply that to the rays themselves here. I'm going to concentrate it around here. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and increase the exposure in this area. About 0.3. Yeah, I like that. So the reason why I did this with a new radial gradient and didn't apply it to the luminance or this luminance range is because I only wanted it to increase the brightness, the exposure on the central part of the image where the rays locally are. Whereas if I went ahead and did that over here, it would increase the brightness of these streams over here, and I didn't want it to do that. So I made a new radial gradient, increased the exposure to really increase the amount of pop on the rays and really attract the eye towards the center of the image. All right, so this image is starting to look outstanding and really engaging. And there's one more step we can take to take it even farther, and that is I want to go ahead and reduce the clarity on the highlights and the brighter part of the image, just to add to the ethereal sense of fog. I don't know if you've seen my YouTube video on winter photography, but in that video, I talked about how much I like reducing clarity, and that same concept applies here. I want to reduce the clarity to increase the sense of that haze. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus button and go ahead and select luminance range. And I'm just going to click somewhere in the crepuscular rays, and I'm going to go ahead and customize this range. And I want to actually make it probably expand to roughly the brighter 2/3 of the image or so, because I want to make sure that I'm capturing the light from the sun and the rays. Yeah, about there. All right, so I'm going to go down here now that I'm selecting that, to the clarity slider, and I'm going to go ahead and reduce the clarity on that. I can obviously do it too strong. I don't want to do that, but probably somewhere around, yeah, about -30, I think. And it's a slight effect, but it adds just a little bit more to the ethereal sense of fog and haze, and I think that looks fantastic. All right, so the second image I want to process with you guys today was taken at Maroon Park in Aspen, Colorado. And I had taken a trip up there with my wife that day, early in the morning before sunrise, and I was prepared for sunrise. And I took the time to find a location to photograph, and I was able to find some rocks in the foreground lake and get everything positioned properly before that, very short time period where I got that, that beautiful color. And sunrise started to happen, and I got those piercing warm colors, illuminating the peaks of the mountain, giving it that warm, maroon glow, hence the name. And I think the photograph turned out well. All right, so I've opened up my Maroon Bells image in Adobe Lightroom here, and as you can see in its default state, the image is rather unappealing. The sky is too bright, the mountains are too bright, the foreground is too dim, and overall, it doesn't really have that magical pop. However, with the power of Adobe Lightroom and using local enhancements, we can really transform this image, and I'm going to show you how we can turn this into one of the best images I think I've ever taken. All right, so the very first adjustment I'm going to make is going up to the camera profile, and switching it to camera standard for my Nikon D300 because for my camera that typically produces better results. All right, so the first local enhancement I'd like to make to this image is to the sky. I think that the sky is overexposed, and I want to go ahead and correct that, but do it in such a way that it doesn't negatively impact these dark ridges that are already too dark. So the way we can do that is by making a linear gradient and then making a modification to the linear gradient such that it doesn't affect these ridges. So let's do that. So I'll select linear gradient here, add it to the image, and line it up how I want it. And I want it just to be a bit above the lake. Yeah, exactly. All right, so in this masking category here, we should see this add and subtract button. And if you don't, you can always just click on the mask and it will bring it up. So because we're trying to take away something from the mask, we want to click subtract. So I'm going to go click subtract, and I want to select brush because I want to custom draw in the areas that I don't want this effect to be applied on. So one quick note is this auto mask button. We want this checked because auto mask does a very good job of making sure that this brush doesn't target certain parts of the image that we don't want. Like we don't want it to seep into the sky or to the mountains. So it does a really great job of detecting that for us. We don't even have to be that careful often. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing in this and taking away the mask on the ridges here. Okay. Now, see, look at that auto mask. Okay. So now our mask is targeting the sky and the tops of the mountains. So what we can do now is go ahead and adjust the exposure of the sky and bring it to a place where we want it. And I think I want it to be about here, negative 1.43. All right, there we go. Now the sky and the mountains are in a place where it's exposed more correctly. All right, so the next adjustment I want to make is to this lake area. I want to go ahead and increase the exposure on the lake, really bringing it out. So we're going to add a second linear gradient. I'm going to go select linear gradient. And I want to apply the effect so it goes up to the top of the lake here. That polarizes the first adjustment we made with the sky. And we can affect the length of this gradient and right here. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and increase the exposure. Yeah, about there. All right, so the next modification I want to make to this image is to the shadows. I want to bring out the color and the luminance in the shadows just a little bit. And the way we can do that is we can add a luminance range. So I'm going to go ahead and select the luminance range mask, and we can click somewhere in the shadow area and it will automatically try to detect that range. So I think this is pretty close to where we want. Probably increase the range just a little bit because if it's not smooth enough, it's going to look weird. All right, so that's about right. So we have to be very careful. We don't want to do it too much because it'll look weird, but we can enhance the shadows just a little bit. Yeah, about there. So we can turn the effect on and off, and we can see it just added just a little bit of luminance to the shadows. There we go. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is just make the peaks pop out a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is create a radial gradient, and I'm going to go ahead and carefully select the peaks. About here. Now I want to add just a slight hint of contrast. It's a very slight effect, but it brings out the mountains just a bit more. Makes them pop out more. All right, so the next thing I want to do here to this image is add some contrast to these rocks, and I want to bring out the the waves in the water a little bit as well in the process of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and add a radial gradient here for the larger collection of rocks. I'm going to go ahead and rotate the orientation so it matches the orientation of the rocks. And I'm going to expand the coverage a little bit so that it also impacts the waves around it. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and increase contrast. Okay, about 40. I'm going to make an equivalent one for the smaller collection of rocks. Go ahead and select radial gradient. All right, now increase this one by 40 as well. All right, so now these rocks and these waves just stand out that much more. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make one final adjustment to this image, and that's increasing the global saturation just slightly. So all the local adjustments we've made so far to contrast and exposure have resulted in an image that has more contrast. And when we increase contrast, we actually increase our perception of color as well. But sometimes that's not enough and we want to add just a little bit more. So that's what this is, just a little finishing touch of saturation. All right, I hope you guys have enjoyed my photograph of Maroon bells. All right, thank you for taking the time to check out my video. I hope you found some of the content in this video very helpful. And if you did, leave a like in the comments box below. And if you'd like to check out more content like this, subscribe to my channel. And lastly, if you'd like to check out my photography work, where I've done landscape photography, wildlife photography, and astrophotography, see the link in the description below. And cheers.